Hello and welcome, whether it's good morning or a good afternoon or even a good evening for you. Well, welcome to the next WTA webinar, the Teleport Business Model in a Software-Driven World. I'm Robert Bell, I'm Executive Director. I'm joined by our Director of Certification and Membership, Randall Barney, running things in the back end. If you're not familiar with WTA, we exist to advocate for the interests, commercial and other interests of teleport operators, as well as promote excellence in their operations, in their technology, and their business practices, which brings us together with the teleport industry, together with the satellite community, as well as the technology community. This webinar, like many of the ones that we put on, is a product of something we call the Technology Advisory Board. We formed it, it must be a year and a half, 2 years ago now, to get advice, basically, both for our organization, but also for our members on the technology changes that are going to make such a huge difference. And you've probably noticed every single year, technology figures larger and larger in our business as the demand for improving and updating our services continues to grow. So we're very proud to have Comtech, Kratos Defense and Security Solutions, and Network Innovations Advanced Networks all represented on that Technology Advisory Board. Today's agenda, we're going to do, after this brief introduction, I'm going to share some key takeaways from the report that you saw on your screen, which is called The Teleport Business Model in a Software-Driven World, released a few weeks ago. And then we're going to go to a panel discussion with the real experts on this to talk more about this. And I would be highly remiss if I did not thank some companies for making this possible. These are our industry leader members: Eutelsat Group, Intelsat, Kratos, Liquid Intelligent Technologies, and SES. Their additional financial support makes possible not only our regular research reports, but also the webinars that are based on them. Okay, so this is an interesting session. The teleport business model has been changing for a long time. As a matter of fact, I like to say that teleport operators are the masters of what in the startup community is called the pivot, right? The market has changed underneath us, competition has changed underneath us, technology has changed, and so we're going to pivot our businesses in a new direction. And it goes way back to the 80s when we were just doing bare bones uplinking, and then gradually began to evolve outsourced broadcast centers and became providers of cruise and maritime services and business networks and secure military satcom. And then the internet came along and we found a new business there. Well, today, I believe personally, and I think the people on this panel would agree with me, that we're confronting the biggest pivot yet. Competition from Starlink, yes, Starlink, the elephant in the room, as it's been called, is already driving down pricing aggressively, and there are 3 more LEO constellations coming into the market, so we can look forward to more of that. They're going to bring demand for new gateways, of course, which is good for our business, but they'll also challenge the economics and the core value add of the GEO satellite operators and of teleport operations as well. And meanwhile, of course, the demand for ground segment, for capacity, for flexibility, for seamless integration with terrestrial networks, which is relatively new for us, frankly, is beginning to overwhelm our legacy analog technologies. So the technology vendor community is having to rethink their product lines. Teleport operators are having to rethink and renew their core value proposition and to make strategic investments, as they always do, but always keeping in mind the one thing that has kept the teleport community strong, and that is you don't get too far ahead of your customers' actual needs. So when we conducted this, we interviewed a lot of very interesting people for this report, and we've had some takeaways to share with you. One of them, first one, of course, is that yes, we're having change forced on us whether we like it or not. And that's been happening because of LEO, MEO, but also just the whole rise of software-defined satellites operating in every orbit. Making it really necessary for us to change how we think about our costing and our pricing, how we're going to increasingly integrate these verticalized satellite services, which is, again, something that's been going on since the days of HTS. How do we really integrate them into our services so that we can make money, make a profit, and be able to carry on? And inevitably, how do we break down the silos that have arisen so that we can really ignite growth in our companies? Now, these same forces, which are so challenging and stressful for the business, are also, of course, opening new markets. So the pressure is really on the GEO operators that have been the core of connectivity for most of our industry. But LEO and MEO is also creating new demand on the ground for integrated services, integrated in a way they've never been before, thanks to automation and virtualization. It's a really big topic that we've been covering now for about a year. And that is driving the expansion of value-added services. Every new service you can imagine, network monitoring, which is not new, IT services, cloud integration, cybersecurity, on and on. And each one of these, interestingly enough, is putting us in competition with the folks who actually own the spacecraft, because they're all doing the same thing. They're all trying to get into this managed vertical market service, which is going to make life very interesting. And finally, our contributors were unanimous in saying, satellite operator consolidation, yeah, it's going to happen. The Eutelsat OneWeb merger completed last year is the beginning probably of a very large scale trend. But on the good news side, the adoption of these virtualization, automation, and IT telco standards is going to make a huge impact on our business by driving integration with terrestrial. So we'll have that opportunity to accept the challenge. I used to like to give in speeches to say, listen, we represent 1% of global telecom spending. Anybody want to go for 2? Doesn't sound like that big a takeaway. So, okay, so that's what you'll find when you download this report in much more detail, of course. And it's my pleasure now to introduce our panelists. We begin with Frank Zullo, who is President of Network Innovations at Advanced Networks. Michelle Dothi, who's Chief Commercial Officer at Nexsat. If you're not familiar with that, it's a ground segment as a service provider. Marcus Eslich, I thought I was going to do better than that, Marcus. My apologies. Marcus Eslich-Bichler, Director of Product Management at Kratos Defense and Space. Will Mudge, Vice President of Engineering at Speedcast. And my friend who I haven't seen in quite a while now, Billy Sims, who's now Vice President for Growth at Comtech. So I welcome all of you. We'll get to those questions in just a minute. But if you, listening to us and watching us, have questions, please do put them in the Zoom chat, and I'll do my best, as I say, to get them to you. Okay, well, let me stop sharing my screen so we can spend more time with the people here who are the real experts. And I'm going to start by just asking each of them to do what I usually do, which is to briefly describe you and your company and how they relate to this topic of the evolving teleport business model. And I'm just going to do it in the order that they're appearing on my screen. So Will Mudge, I'd like to start with you.
Great, thanks, Robert. So at Speedcast, we are the largest managed service provider. We have 19 teleports, 220 antennas at those teleports across over 100 different satellites. So I think we're number 2, if I'm not mistaken, Randall, on the independent teleport operator list. Maybe number 1. I think it changes by year sometimes, somewhere in that area, right? So we're a very large teleport operator, but obviously being a managed service provider too, very much affected by LEO and the advent of Starlink and OneWeb and how that affects and what our customers want. So a very pivotal topic for us.
Okay, thank you, Will. Michelle, please.
Hello. Yes, good morning and good afternoon, depending where you are. In fact, again, I'm the CCO of Nexsat, and Nexsat, historically, we were a satellite service provider, interconnecting hubs worldwide, and now we are pivoting to a technology provider, providing OSS, BSS solutions, of course, totally cloud-based and virtualized for teleport and satellite operators.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Michelle. For my turn to you, Frank, to tell us a little bit about yourself and Advanced Networks.
All right, so Network Innovations, Advanced Networks is a division of it. We specialize in the private networks and much more niche aspect of managed services. We're not number 1, Will, so we don't have a problem in that in regards to antennas. We tend to be a little bit more bespoke, and this topic is a very much a driving critical element for us in our future designs.
Well, thank you very much. Billy, welcome. Glad to have you in, I think, your first WTA webinar, and tell us a little bit about yourself and Comtech's role here.
Yeah, thank you. And I wanted to thank WTA for having this important discussion, because a lot of times the advancements in space that we talk about are with regards to the satellites, and the ground infrastructure can be an afterthought. Before I share any comments today, my lawyers tell me I should mention some of my remarks will be forward-looking. And so they just wanted to put that out there, that results may vary in the future because we are undergoing a transformation.
We will not hold you to it. I won't, at least. I don't know.
I feel they were, I'm a salesperson, right? So I have to put that out there. And Robert, you probably know, I started out at the teleports. I was part of the SES acquisition of Veristar. And then I moved from a satellite operator to a satcom integrator, into a geospatial integrator. And now I'm here with Comtech, and where we provide, the ground infrastructure. So I've seen this through many different lenses, and we were undergoing a large transformation at the teleports back in the early 2000s. And, we faced some similar challenges today. And at Comtech, we recently went through an incredible transformation to meet some of the fast changing market needs, including the teleport business model. So at Comtech, we're leading the way to usher in a new era of ubiquitous and smart-enabled connectivity anywhere and anytime. With more than 50 years of proven technology leadership, we're anticipating and capitalizing on the convergence of the communications infrastructure to connect the unconnected, bridge the digital divide, and empower our customers and global communities while we deliver smart-enabled services and new insights.
Thank you. I had some very interesting off to the side conversations with your CEO back at the last World Satellite Business Week, and I could tell the company was really grappling with the big issues. Last but not least, Marcus, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the relationship of Kratos to this topic?
Sure. So, hi everybody. I'm Marcus Illitzbichler, Director of Product Management at Kratos. Also, my first time here, so very excited. Thank you for the invite. And similar to Billy's disclaimer, I'm from product management, so anything I say is subject to change without notice.
Anything I say at any time is subject to change, but that's another matter.
So Kratos, yes, we are, as probably most of you know by now, a ground systems provider, ranging from antennas to RF equipment, signal processing, packet processing, all the fun stuff. We have, for a long time now, made heavy investments and put a lot of effort into digitization and virtualization of the teleport, which is, I guess, why we're here today. So I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Well, good. Well, then let's get to it. Let's start with you, actually, since you had the last word. You referred to it in your opening remarks, but over the past 2 years, what are the technology and/or market changes that you think are having the biggest impact on the products that you have to manage?
So I think we have about an hour, 45 minutes left. Let's
you only get one or two, sorry.
Okay, let's do two then. Well, let's do the opposite ends of the spectrum here. Let's start in the LEO space, right? So obviously the proliferation of large-scale LEO constellations has driven a lot of change now in the market already. New markets are being opened for adoption, existing markets are being disrupted, and everybody's scrambling to really find their place now in this new situation. So how do we partner? How do we compete? How do we restructure our services models? There's a lot of interesting stuff happening, and I'm really interested in the various business models that have now sprung up in the various attempts to combine multi-orbit offers into coherent and pervasive services. So lots of interesting activity on the LEO side of things, obviously. That's an obvious one, right? Now you give me two, right? So the other one that I would point out is, and that I'm really interested in, because we have lots of customers in that space, is on the geo side. If we now go all the way out to geostationary orbit, the rise of the software-defined satellite. You know the saying, software is eating the world. It's a pretty old saying by now. I'd say software is done with the world by now, and it's coming for our satellites. And eventually after our teleports, right? So anyway, but what we're seeing now with more and more software-defined, very high throughput satellites being launched is a massive increase in capacity, a massive increase in flexibility, enormous numbers of beams out there, enormous amounts of dynamicism that's out there, that's for the taking. And similar to how operators are trying to figure out their new role, their new place in the LEO market and in the face of the LEO disruption. On the geo side, we're seeing operators trying to grapple with the question, well, how can I best leverage all these new powers? With lots of power comes lots of, well, responsibility, but also accountability. How can we maximize our investment into these big and powerful satellites? What does it mean for the ground stations? How can I make sure that the ground keeps pace with space? And I totally heard from one of my colleagues
No, and you put that, that's a very, you framed that, I think, very accurately. It's a question of keeping ground in sync with space. Just before we leave you, I'm just going to ask the second question because it's so closely related. You laid out several really big topics there. Can you give us a specific example of, one of those changes in action with a customer? Obviously, don't name names, but what does that actually mean in your business?
So I'll take the geo example, right? So we have several customers now launching software-defined satellites in the near future. So as we are now putting together ground systems for them, a lot of the questions, a lot of the time that we spend with them designing the systems, it revolves around how to best leverage these software-defined payloads. It's about scalability, about orchestration. So we spend a lot of time talking about software-defined networking, digitization, of course, as the pillar of everything, virtualization as a consequence of the necessity for the ground to keep up with the dynamicism we see both in space, but also the changing demands on the user side. So yes, it's topics like virtualization, like software-defined networking that are drivers, and also cybersecurity. We cannot underestimate that topic. So these are topics that are just popping up more and more and are driving a lot of challenges and interest and conversations on our side.
The market is dynamic when your customer asks you questions that you're not quite prepared to answer. Okay, Billy, let's turn to you about the same thing. What are the one or two technology market changes you think have the biggest impact? Marcus has already explained to us that software has finished eating the world and is now coming for dessert into orbit. So let's see what you think about that.
Yeah, so we talked about software-defined satellites. We talked about the MEO and LEO constellations. And with the MEO and LEO constellations, we need to talk about how the ground infrastructure changes, right? So we're moving from 6 teleports globally to satisfy a geo constellation to 600 to 700 potential ground stations for LEO and MEO satellites, right? Because their footprints are so much smaller. And so it requires more ground infrastructure. So that's one of the big changes that we're seeing. Yeah, and then with the LEO and the ability to have smaller Earth stations or more Earth stations, they are smaller. They take up less power, which is great in terms of your operating expenses. But you then purchase more, so you need to have cheaper equipment, if you will. You're not buying those 18-meter C-band dishes that you bought back in the 90s and early 2000s, right?
Right. Yeah, I like to say that we should look to the consumer electronics business, which has to charge less every year for what it sells, and they somehow make more money. How about you? Can you give us a specific example, again, no names, of that kind of change as it actually gets translated into hardware, or in this case, into software?
Yeah. So the hardware and the software component there is really important because our customers today, as Marcus stated, we need to be able to keep up with the advancements in space. And so you want to be able to upgrade your hardware with the software updates without having to go out and replace each individual piece of hardware. So helping our customers with that flexibility to be able to change as their needs change in space. We've been able to provide that to our customers today.
Yeah, that's interesting. Poor hardware manufacturers. You're just not going to be able to sell as many boxes. And I'm talking about everybody. Frank, over to you. What you obviously watch and think about this a great deal. What technology and market changes would you put at the top of your list in terms of impact? And can you give us a specific example?
Sure. So I mean, Leo is obviously going to get mentioned, but I'm gonna put it in a little bit of different light. So Leo has added to the commoditization of our business. Mm-hmm. So that what Billy referred to is all the results of more availability, more inside. Something because we're not a B2C customer company. We're very much enterprise critical infrastructure government. I would say the proliferation or the commoditization of bandwidth has also led to the increasing cybersecurity threat. So I know it's a little odd to bring in here, but the cybersecurity threat on teleport infrastructure on customers' networks is growing rapidly in our world, to the point that the first accomplished actors of AI are actually in the bad actors in the cyberspace, not so much the good guys. So I'd say that's a big advent of it. We're seeing more and more critical infrastructure being mandated into private networks, and I think that opens up a real opportunity to the ground segment, to be able to control and have attributable networks that are out there, as opposed to, where does my data go? Specific example. I certainly won't name the name, but I can make one very specific. We have a government customer that the contract has been essentially the same for the last 10 years. It's been augmented, as I know Will and I discussed before about in the SD-WAN, we're not just supplying them satellite bandwidth, we're supplying them cellular connectivity, terrestrial connectivity, and what have you. And for the renewal that will probably be coming up in an unnamed date, because that will probably give away my customer, it's not going to be classed as a satellite bandwidth contract anymore. It's going to be classed as a network contract, and it's going to be as a service, and that changes. I think that changes your view on ground segment, and I think we're seeing that, right, with the commoditization of the bandwidth space. Not completely, but it's going to be. I think we used this in our last one, Robert, where we said that, what's your slice of the pie, or is the pie getting bigger? The pie's getting bigger.
Yeah, it has to because of the changes. But I like that. I mean, I think we're going to be in businesses that we never envisioned. Cybersecurity, we kind of get, but there's going to be another raft of these things that you're going to say, well, we never did that before. Michelle, I'm going to come back to you because I want to, before we talk about the virtualization of everything, I want to go to the fellow who's running all those antennas at all those teleports. Will, how about you? What technology and market changes that you think have the biggest impact in your business, and an example would be great.
So I've
in fact,
I'm sorry, Michelle or Will?
No, Michelle, just hang on. I want to come back to you after we hear from somebody who's running all this physical infrastructure. I'll be right back to you. Go ahead, Will.
Sorry, Michelle. I'll try to be quick, but I don't want to talk too fast. So I've been taking notes here, and I think first one is I completely agree with Frank. I think that expanding scope, right? You're not just buying a teleport anymore, you're buying a service. That is part of our expanding pie, and I think that's a big piece of our future on how we do it. But to answer your question directly, I think there's three major drivers. There's the LEO, which we're all talking about. 5G is driving it too, although I think we all mention it less, but there's a significant pain in losing that C-band and how we all have to migrate and how it affects the business as well as, and I know we talk about SD-WAN as an enabler for a lot of things, right? How you bring these services together, but it changes how the teleports function too, right? We have a lot of networks for customers specifically where they want to be tied in with a direct access. They don't want to go through the internet, right? That risk, that cybersecurity risk, that touch point has a problem. But some customers are moving away to SD-WAN where they can deal with an internet link, and now they're backhauling. So when you get a satellite service, you don't necessarily need to have that customized backhaul to them as well, right? So it changes that model on the backside too, because there's the satellite side, but it's getting the satellite to the customers. It's the other side of the teleport that we don't often think about. But I think SD-WAN is a big part of that. Now places are adopting it so that they can, work from home. You can have your SD-WAN connect back to your corporate environment and be just like you're at the office, right? All of that's enabled through that one. So I think those are the major drivers for it. I do think it does expand our scope quite a bit. And I mean, there's a couple other interesting things we'll talk about, but I think that answers the question you were asking.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a specific example, you're doing a lot of multi-orbit SD-WAN enabled work. Is there any particular, you want to tell us a real quick story about
a real quick story. We've been on the software path and the SD-WAN path for a while, right? We rolled out new modems and everything else, and then we started rolling out SD-WAN, but it has really picked up speed over the last year in particular, right? And we have an exceptionally large number of customers, in my opinion, running through these devices and appliances. And it's quite a challenge to grow into it, I think, as a business, right? There's a lot of different skill sets. There's a lot of functionality and things that these can do. So getting that into something that makes sense for how you can manage it, so your scope doesn't grow too crazy, but the sheer functionality of features that it brings to our customers has been incredible. Like, I really think it changes that user experience. And if we go back to our roots, we're all satellite people. We all believe in communication. We all believe in the commercialization of space. We should all be super excited about what's happening, even though, from a revenue perspective and our, the way we've done our work, it's all changing at the moment. This is really neat to see the positive impact it's having and how people are gravitating to it so quickly. Somebody sent me a link this week where they now have a backpack to load a Starlink residential terminal, so you can backpack your Starlink around with you. So who would have ever thought we would have had man packs for civilians so easily available? So to me, it's exciting. The SD-WAN really does, give you that layer 7. You can prioritize the applications. It expands the feature set. Your experience is so much better. And it really is that next generation for what our customers see at the end. And I think we all have to remember that.
Well, I'm just waiting for my satellite terminal hat. But anyway, okay. So we have heard from people who are on the technology side of the business. We've heard from teleport operators, systems integrators. That's why, Michelle, I want to leave you last, because you're coming into the middle of this with a software. You're starting from software and going from there. So in terms of, what are the changes you're seeing in technology and markets that make the biggest difference to you? And can you give us tell us a brief story about an implementation?
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, yes, the biggest change we see on the market is LEO. And due to the pressure of LEO, we see that satellite operators, regional satellite operators, are now moving from just selling megahertz, as they did since the beginning, now going downstream to the selling megahertz, to managed services. And then, of course, they invest in hubs. For the time being, mainly physical hubs, but okay, looking to the future also to fully virtualized hub. But now, okay, after that, they need all the rest. And this is exactly what we provide. We provide all what is needed now to manage those different new hubs for them to be quick on the market. And the technology we develop first for ourselves, now we offered it to the market, to them, in order for them to, in fact, be able to to offer managed service very quickly from the different hubs they have, whatever the brand. Sometimes they already have iDirect hub. They could have they purchase a Dialog hub. They are looking to new solution from Kratos or from Comtech or from ST Engineering. And with our solution, we are able to integrate all this together. If in one application, then we offer them all the feature from of course, monitoring. We offer monitoring. It's also multi-role, it's multi-level. Then we provide the different access depending where you are in the value chain, down to the end users. And we provide also all the billing and everything. All what we offer is totally virtualized, is cloud-based, could be private cloud, could be also inside the country, because in some countries you are not allowed, especially for governmental case, you are not allowed to go outside the country. Then in this case, we are installing private POPs. Either, okay, we can also interconnect with other network, because we already have something like 20 teleports already connected to our platform. And then we can extend also the coverage they have if they need to have a worldwide coverage. This is something we can offer them very, very quickly. Then, and all our business is OpEx based and can be deployed in few weeks. Then this is what we are offering, and we see that this is a trend on the market. We already are doing now one first large implementation, and we have several other coming in the pipe, and this is a very interesting story. And in fact, the goal of all this is really to optimize all the operations of the teleport in order to reduce the cost. And how do we do that? Thanks to automation, orchestration, and we provide also all the API, because all what we provide is based on API. And in fact, in order to help them to enter in the software-defined network, this is exactly what we provide now, as we are speaking.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So yes, commoditization is coming to your operating system as well out there, everybody. So look at that. Okay, so we're about halfway into our time together, and I want to just explore a couple of other things with you. I think Will was the one who referred to this. All this exciting digitization and multi-orbit, multi-path services are all terrific, and they're also causing big shifts in revenue. How much of it there is, where it comes from, what the net is after our direct expenses. So I just would love to hear from each of you, maybe an example of how, where does this show up in our business, and what is our response to it? Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's something that we have to sort of counter program to. Marcus, let's start with you, if you'd be so kind.
Sure. So I think the question was multi-orbit and how it changes revenue streams. Yeah.
Well, exactly. It's how you as a business deal with that, because whenever your revenue, we all wish in business that it would just go on being the way it's always been, and it never has been and never will be. So,
well, as a new in the market, I'm all for disruption. So,
well, disruption is always great when you're not the one being disrupted. So, anyway.
Fair enough. So the way we're seeing changes in current business models pop up on our radar screens is, among others, in more and more demands when it comes to interoperability and multi-orbit capabilities, for example, right? Multi-orbit sounds like a lot of fun, in fact, but as Will kind of alluded to, there's a lot of complexity there that needs to be sorted out. You need to find the right bits and pieces to put together to make it work. SD-WAN obviously is a big topic there, very powerful, but it takes time and effort and skills to really put it together and make it work. Mm-hmm. But we're also seeing it's still small, but it's a growing, let's put it that way, is a demand for new and more flexible pricing models, really. If we're looking at a world now where connectivity is much more in demand, much more flexible, much more on and off and spread out and diverse, the question is, well, how are we actually going to license this? Specifically now, if we look at virtualization and on-demand workloads, if everything is just running on that's the always question, right? Oh, if I can run all of this somewhere in a server or somewhere in the cloud, it means I can, turn it on and off on demand. Do I have to pay when it's turned off? That poses a lot of interesting questions, how to price these things, how to license them. Do you look at megahertz? Do you look at megabits? So that's how what we see on our side. Lots of more and more questions from how to help our customers restructure their business.
Yeah, well, thank you for talking in that kind of detail. It's a huge puzzle. Billy, I'm going to ask you the same question. So here you are trying to figure out the future, and yet you got to do it in a revenue model.
Exactly. Well, you know what? Something Marcus just said is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to solve our customers' problems, right? And we heard some folks talk about shifting from CapEx to OpEx, and how do we do that? And how ground station as a service is a big disruptor, but we also see that as an opportunity here at Comtech, right? And so listening to our customers' needs in terms of how they'd like to pivot to the future. And we're also working to take care of those legacy systems, right? Because you still need to be able to maintain those legacy systems while you move forward to the future. And so that's what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me come back to you, because you've recently been making some noise, or your company's been making some noise in the social media, at least, about your successes with Starlink and what that actually potentially means to your business, while obviously everything is changing underneath you. What are some of the issues you're dealing with from a revenue standpoint?
Certainly, it's revenue affecting. Like when you move that many megabits from the GEO model into the LEO model, we see an impact from it, but it's interesting to see how it changes by the market segments that we're in. While we're not in Aero, we see that Aero is more protracted on getting the LEO uptake, right? It takes time to get certifications, it takes time to get installs, and I think it's maybe a good, indicator of one side of the equation as compared to the other side, where people are switching to Starlink instantly. And there's a lot in the middle, right? We talked about some of those customers that have their own dedicated networks, right? Or they have specific requirements for not touching the internet, or they haven't deployed SD-WAN as an option yet. And everyone is in the journey in a different spot. So how it affects the revenue is largely specific customer dependent, as well as the commercial models that go along with it. Starlink and commercial maritime, when you look at the revenue models, there's the 50 gigabit plan, $250 for it. But it's very easy to burn through 50 gigabits of data on Starlink in a heartbeat, right? A couple of movies and you're done, right? So we see that happening very quickly, and then falling back to the geo, because the geo's price point, when you're not looking at that pay-per-use type of model, is different than the Starlink price point. So I think it's like anything. You have the initial reaction hump that you're seeing, and then you start to get into, okay, now we know what this is. And then you start to figure out how does it fit into your longer term business model as a customer. And we see people going through those cycles and how that affects our revenue stream. Yeah, there's an effect, of course, but if we can provide that managed service and we can help them through this, and you give them Starlink and you help them manage it, and then they fail across, or you keep emails going across VSAT while Teams calls go across Starlink, all of that brings that value. It expands that scope, like Frank said, and I think that's how we can reduce the impact to the total revenue and or create more opportunities for longer revenue streams, because you're growing your sphere of influence.
Yeah, thank you. I'm always amazed at how quickly we expect things to happen and how slowly they actually do happen. Right, evolution, people take a long time. Michelle, obviously, this is, I think, a lot of what we've just heard about is really good news for Nexsat. What's your vision here of this of the revenue opportunity or risk?
Yeah, indeed. The point is that the pressure of the LEO is very high in Starlink, to name it. It's very clear. For example, in our legacy business in Africa, we saw that we lose something like 50% of our revenue in 5 months. Then it's really dramatic. But fortunately, yes, we were anticipating this problem, and then it's why we prepare our technology, and we were ready. And okay, and now we see a shift in revenue. And what is very interesting that we anticipate now even to have more revenue than before. This is a quite good news for us, because for the time being we are quite alone on the market, able to provide this part of the technology that is needed, especially when you are moving from the traditional business to the new fully digitalized, fully virtualized solution. Then anyway, you need to have an OSS BSS. Either you develop this yourself, and this is what we see with the big guys, SES, Intelsat, they develop their solution internally. But now, if you have to move fast and to go very fast on the market, then yeah, the only solution is to use a fully virtualized solution. And thanks to the fact that we are totally OPEX based, it's very low risk, and there is no investment or very small investment to be done to start. Then this is what we see concerning the maritime business. In fact, now we were obliged to offer also SD-WAN solution. This is something we develop also, and this is also connected to our platform. And then this help, of course, to maintain also the business in the maritime market.
Interesting. All right, last word to you on this. I mean, you've described it as being, developing bespoke solutions, high demand, or very complex and specific requirements from your customers. So when we're talking about this revenue shift, both positive and negative, where is your company on that?
Well, I think the easiest way is to answer you. I think your original question was, where is it affecting your business? I'll say everywhere. So we are a little bit more bespoke. We tend to stay away from necessarily just pure commodity aspects. So we have some value, but that being said, the revenue side is being felt. And I was going to probably answer this question completely differently, except last week was our sales conference, and a number of our salespeople came and said, "Hey, you know, we're salespeople. We have numbers to make. How do we make numbers with the revenue being lower?" And this is gonna be completely off topic, but it's gonna give you the flavor of NI. And you know, we pulled up the slide that says culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? The culture is we're a 33-year-old company that has had the same ownership through growth from small to mid-size, or whatever you want to call NI now. And the answer from our co-CEOs was very clear. You do what the customer needs, and if that means that our revenue is going to go down, then we have to build our business model to service them. It is affecting our business everywhere. You need somebody that's nimble and able to adjust, and you also need somebody stable to be able to supply your services. At the end of the day, the customer wants to get their data from point A to point B, and it's our job to do that. And they really don't care whether we're making less revenue or not.
Oh, I've never noticed that they do. Yes.
Yeah, and you hit it. You know, the consumer business is supposed to make bigger sales with less ARPU, you know, values. In our case, our whole goal is to provide value for the customer, and you can't provide value on a commoditized basis. So it's driving our pivot. It's driving our shift. We're redesigning our entire core network infrastructure, ground infrastructure, sooner than I had originally planned. But it's exciting times for us. We're completely building a smart network that'll be able to bespoke add private networks to it. And yeah, the revenue is going to be replaced in another section. So if it's lower on bandwidth, it'll show up somewhere else.
Yeah, no, that's that. Thank you. That's really, I want to compliment all of you on sharing some things that people normally don't talk about, but I think they're very illustrative for our listeners. So thank you. All right, we've got about 15 minutes left, and I want to just focus at the sort of the bottom line in all of this is we're ultimately talking about competitive advantage. You've got things that you've done well that have been a competitive advantage for you, and I'm really going to focus on the teleport operators, competitive advantage. So what, first of all, do you think that people in this teleport community need to invest in, need to be thinking about to strengthen their competitive advantage? And it may be, as Frank just said, in a completely different area than they're currently operating. And then secondly, what's in their way that's going to make that hard? So two-part question. And gosh, I don't know, Frank, let's start with you because you're on my screen. So the competitive advantage that, how do we get it stronger in the teleport community, and what's going to get in our way?
Well, I think we're on our way with the software-defined side of things and the software basis. Michelle's mentioned OpEx. Billy's mentioned it really comes down to me, and without being too simplified on it, it's speed to market and cost of capital. So I can't go out and have huge capital infrastructures because my market is not there for the amortization of that capital. So, and the other side is my customer doesn't want to wait. I mean, their problem isn't something, they're not signing 5-year contracts anymore, so they want to be able to have a partner that allows them to be fast to their end market. As I said, we do not do B2C, so it's always B2B for us. So they have an end market that they have to get fast to, and they also want us to be able to pivot quickly. So, I mean, I think the biggest barrier is in that world is it has to be all software defined, or it's hard to be half and half. So if you have a super well software defined and SD-WAN style backbone, but you have a very old, hardware based config somewhere, then the speed of the network kind of breaks down, right? So we're looking at the idea of bringing it software defined across the board. And I think the comment about software eating the planet and now dessert is satellite. I think that's very appropriate. It's just going to be all consuming, or it's all or nothing, really, I think.
Software's eating the planet, culture's eating software. This is a very, very dog-eat-dog
Culture's
world.
eating strategy.
Strategy, sorry. Well, I'm going to just flip over to Will here, because you guys are often having a Vulcan mind meld about this. Will, how about you? I mean, how do we continue to strengthen that competitive advantage, and what's going to get in our way?
Yeah, it's so funny. I was typing, and as I'm typing, Frank said exactly what I was typing in better words.
Well, all right, then, never mind.
The cost of CapEx, is a huge blocker in the time to train or hire, right? So Frank said exactly the same way, much more eloquently. So well done, Frank. I thought that was good. I think maybe to build on other things that we see for areas to invest, in my opinion, you need to pick your targets, right? I think historically we've been an industry where we go back after a whole lot because there's not a huge market base to go after. And maybe it lessens the quality of what we could respond to if we picked the top 3 that we wanted. But if you can pick your targets a bit better and understand those markets that you're going after and how they tie into your long-term strategy, I think you're going to be better off. As well as from a security perspective, we've been very fortunate on our side, knock on wood. But I think designing security into your systems as you do these SD-WAN products and as you leverage them and as you start to flow more data and more traffic through, and you increase the availability at the remote side that was not there before, right? It opens up a lot more security holes that were previously not accessible because we had satellites in between, right? So now we've got to bring our customers along for the ride as well. So I think, from those perspectives, I think those are the 2 best opportunities. Pick your targets, make sure you're doing this in a secure way, you have a good solid design, and then the biggest blockers are time and money.
As always, the limiting factors.
Always.
Michelle, how about you in terms of, where do you see the competitive advantage for teleport operators coming from in the future, and what potentially is going to make that hard to access?
Yeah, but I think this is already been explained. In fact, now I think that urgently they have to move to automation and also orchestration. And this is exactly where we are. And this is exactly what we do with our platform. Our platform is an orchestration platform, helping them to automatize all the operation, to reduce their cost of operation, to be compatible with the network interface that typically TM forum or also the MEF forum. This is the future, and this is something that we are already offering. And then with our solution, we can help them to move from the legacy infrastructure they have progressively to a fully virtualized. And this can be done step by step, because with our platform, we can already interconnect their physical infrastructure. As far as they have API, we can manage this, and progressively we can move them to a fully virtualized solution. Then this is exactly what needs to be done now in order to reduce the cost and to be able to be totally flexible and then to be able to answer quickly to the needs of the customers.
Okay, thank you. I deliberately left Billy and Marcus for the last because you've got the challenge now of providing your customers with the technology solutions that are going to keep that competitive advantage strong and expand on what you do. So, Billy, what over in your end, what is it you think teleport operators need to be doing, and how can you enable that with your technology?
Yeah, well, so we've already talked about some of the investments in software, the skill sets needed there, and the partnerships to help elevate your software game. As we're helping folks migrate from those legacy RF switches more onto the digital side, offering more flexibility, we strongly believe in the need to standardize. And so that's part of why Comtech has joined the DIFI consortium, because we've seen this siloed approach in the early days. And so we believe that, as the satellite expands beyond the classic applications into the home internet and the LEO and innovations with the direct-to-device connectivity, it's agreed that it's clear that we need to agree on some standards. So standardizing.
You have
Easy for me
yeah.
to say.
It's a great word, isn't it? Standardizing. Yeah. Why don't we just say Diffie? Because both Comtech and Marcus's company are are involved in the Diffie process. I mean, that's an example of what you're talking about, right?
Exactly. And so with that, we can hand it over to Marcus.
Well, there you go, Marcus. That's an introduction you're never going to get from a competitor again. So
I'm really impressed and flabbergasted. Well, I really liked what Frank said earlier. He delivered a banger there. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I mean, how is culture born out? It's born out by the people. It's all about, the way I see it, it's all about skill sets. We have a wave of new technologies coming our way, a wave of new challenges. And the only way we're going to be able to tackle all of it is with the right skill sets, with training, with recruiting. We've pointed it out several times already. Software-defined networking, SD-WAN, it's a must-have at this point. And I actually also liked something that Will pointed out earlier. He was talking about quality of experience. I like seeing that we've already moved now from talking about quality of service to quality of experience. We've moved up to layer 7. We are progressing here. That's great to see. We're going to have to equally grow on the orchestration side. As Michelle pointed out, we're going to have to get better at automation. We're going to have to get better at cybersecurity, it was mentioned earlier. So for me, at the end of the day, it's all about the available skill sets that we need to have in place in order to make our strategies and our business plans work out.
excellent. Listen, thank you, Marcus. We have to end there, unfortunately. I actually have to run to another meeting, believe it or not, which is kind of crazy. But anyway, I want to thank very much Frank, Michelle, Marcus, Will, and Billy for, I think, one of our better webinars. You really nailed this topic. So thank you all very much. Look forward to seeing you next time. And I'm going to turn it over to Randall Barney to bring us home. Randall?
Thank you again to Michelle, Will, Billy, Frank, and Marcus. If you are a WTA member, visit our website to get this report free of charge. If you're not a member, give me a call. We'll fix that. Coming up, we have WTA at the Mobile World Congress at the end of February. Our Teleport Awards luncheon at Satellite on March 19th. Just a reminder that nominations are due tomorrow. So please get those in. We also have our ground segment forum, part of the satellite agenda at the Satellite Show on March 20th. Upcoming reports, the one we just talked, SD-WAN for competitive advantage and revenue growth coming up right before Satellite, and the year of the NGSO in May.